check this out. Listen. Pray fly in the view on this side. Can't believe people try to my eyes. Can't tell you the reason why. All I know is good to be alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guy Show. Now, guys, you know how we do it on the Nobody Asked Me Guy Show. You know, we always are blessed to have dynamic guests, and tonight is no different. We have with us Miss Latrina Sam Johnson. Now, Miss Johnson is truly a Renaissance woman. Now, many times people throw that title around and they call everybody a Renaissance, but anytime, guys, you're a published writer, you're an entrepreneur, you do public speakings, you do trainings, etc., then you earn the title of being a Renaissance person. So tonight, we have with us Miss Latrina Johnson. So without further ado, Miss Latrina, and we call you affectionately Trina Johnson. How are you this evening?
I am well, Coach. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be on your show today. I hope you don't mind me calling you Coach. That's all I know you about. It's Coach Lawrence, Coach. So.
Listen, I am thrilled because that's what I was going to share with my audience, is that it's even more special because you are one of the former students from the mighty Green Oaks High School. And I also share with all of my children, and well, these are not children, but they're young people, is that many times, especially when you look like us, you know, people have a tendency to try to pigeonhole you and say negative things about where you go to school, etc. And I spent a lot of years trying to get people to understand that young people are young people no matter where you are, and you certainly exemplify that, you along with so many others. So we're just glad you're here.
Thank you so much.
Now listen, we just like to start this show off this evening by, first of all, if you have any thing you'd like to share with us in our opening, as far as something I may have missed. I know we talked about the speaking and entrepreneurship and the published writing and things of that nature. I didn't mention the name of your book on purpose. I wanted to obviously allow you the opportunity to share that. And we will talk about the book. I want our audience to know that we will talk about the book, but we're going to talk about some of the other magnificent things that you're doing right now, and we'll save the book for last. Is that okay with you?
That sounds wonderful. Okay, is there anything I would like the audience to know outside of the wonderful accolades that you've given to me? And I really appreciate that, such warm words of encouragement. If there's someone listening, whether it's for you or for someone that's close to you, I want to be able to pour into you that I have had some obstacles and challenges to overcome. So although, as Coach Lawrence has said, you know, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, I'm a leader in many aspects, but I've had some valley moments. You know, I had some lean days. And those valley moments and lean days, it was just a moment in time, and it did not define where God is taking me or where God has placed me in this point in my life. So I wanted to so many people that's kind of like maybe going through a valley moment or they're having challenges. I just want you to know it's just a page in your history. Keep turning the page, keep striving, keep believing in yourself, and just don't ever give up. I would tell anybody, the one thing that I can say that I'm most proud of is that no matter what challenges I may have faced, I'm not going to give up. So I just want to tell anybody that's listening today, it doesn't matter your educational background. It does not matter your age. It doesn't matter what you may or may not have. As I tell my daughter, every problem has a solution. Find the solution to the problem and move forward. And also, scripturally, faith without works is dead. You have the faith, you put in the works, you combine the two, they become a wonderful marriage, and you can manifest anything that you put your heart desire to.
Now, might I ask Trina, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to ask you to repeat that again about the faith without works is dead. And I'm asking you that as an old man, because in my lifetime, Trina, I have fought that thought forever. And I mean, I've had to fight it to defend it. Because if people love to say, well, and I'll use a word, a friend of mine, he would always say this and that and this and that. And so they'd always have some this and that and this and that, but they'd always leave out the fact that they haven't done any work. So when you repeat that again, faith without what is dead?
Faith without works is dead. And God has given us the ability to be co-creators of our life. So we are spiritual beings having a physical experience here on life. So we have to be able to activate the two. We have to be able to bring the two together. So the faith is believing first in God, your Father, who is the source, and also believing in yourself, right? So that's the spiritual aspect of it, because with faith, you can move mountains. Now, the practicality and the physical aspect is you actually doing the work. So let's say, for instance, I've written a couple of books. Before I wrote my first book, before I wrote my second book, I believed that I could. I believed it. So that's where it begins, right? But to fuel my faith, what I did was I used to go to this when Barnes and Noble and Books of Millions and all of those anchor bookstores were still around. I literally would go into the bookstores and I would imagine my books being on a bookshelf. So I began to surround myself with other authors in the bookstore because at the time I didn't know any other authors personally. So I would go into the bookstore. But also in my physical marriage to my faith, I had to write. I could have believed all day long that I could do it. But if I did not sit down and write and go through the proper channels of getting an ISBN so people can purchase my book, if I didn't go and get it copyrighted, it wouldn't have manifested. So I had to first believe, but I also had to back it up with action.
Fantastic. Well, listen, let's talk a little bit about the initial educational growth. I mean, obviously, I know my panel, I call them my panel, but many of them are young people that are college students and obviously some old guys like me. Sometimes we fail to understand that even in our journey, we need to get some form of formal education, whether people like it or not. Can you share with us a little bit about some of the formal education that was derived prior to the writing of the books?
Absolutely. I attended and graduated from the best HBCU there is, and that's Southern University in Baton Rouge. And what was so significant about me going to college and graduating was I was the first to graduate and earn a college degree on both sides of my family, on my mother's side and my father's side. What it did for me was it allowed me to go into a diverse background with people from all over the world with different experiences. So that's education in and of itself, to come into contact with different cultures and different belief systems, and being able to collaborate with people of all ages and ethnicities right there at Southern University. And then just being able to be disciplined, because you go off to college at the age of 18, you're still relatively young. So just even that is a learning aspect, to be able to say, okay, I need to get up and go to college. I mean, go to my classes and come back and to stay the course. So it's very important because it helps you to think philosophically. I can't say the word.
Philosophically.
Yep, that word. So it helps you to think like that. And so it kind of also give you just the other foundational education experiences that you need to be able to move forward. So I think it's very important that everybody go and get an education. But I also want to make sure that everyone knows that education is not only conducive to the classroom, but also things that you learn outside of the classroom. And education also is being able to pick up a book and read and process and understand what you're reading. One of the best books I've ever read, and I read it cover to cover 3 times, is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. It's one of my favorite books because in that book, I learned the difference between entrepreneur and other forms of employment.
Yeah.
And that was
Beautifully
over
put.
20 years
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. With that said, thus they understand the work, and you're getting all these thumbs up and hearts, by the way, as well, Trina. I want you to know that. Now, if you don't mind, when you discuss with us about, excuse me, being the first on either side of the family to actually go to college and to ascertain that degree, can we step back a little further before getting to the book? Because the area, like people like to try to malign where we live. And I've made it very clear all of my career is that we live in places that our parents afford for us to live. So in many of our Black communities, that people don't give you credit for being able to achieve and to grow and to go to a Southern university. And dare I say, I have, even though I'm not a Jaguar, I have to agree that Southern is one of the best HBCUs out there. So what actually drove you to do that? I mean, we've established that we know faith without works is dead. We've established that we know there were not, quote, if I can use this term gingerly and respectfully, there were not professional degrees on either side of the family. What gave you the impetus to move a little further and to ascertain that professional degree?
I dare to dream beyond what I saw.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it helps a lot with the friendships that you make. So for me, one of my best friends, she come from a family of 9, and she was number 8 of siblings. And she had a sibling or 2 to go to college before she did. So she aspired to go to college. Now, unfortunately, she chose Grambling State University. So that's where she went to college.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Unfortunately, no, just kidding. We
I
love the
know,
Tigers.
I know.
Yeah, we love the Tigers. Um, and just to be around educators. So most of because we grew up on the Cooper Road, right? The inner city. And like you kind of mentioned before, that people have a stereotype what people look like and how they behave just from being from that environment.
Mhm.
And I don't know, for your general audience that's listening, I need to give them a little bit of background about the Cooper Road, just in case they don't know, so they kind of understand when we say, the inner city. What did that look like growing up for us? So for me, it was nightly gunfire every night. If we had a night where I didn't hear shooting, I thought something was wrong because my environment, I was very used to hearing shooting as I was going to sleep at night. I witnessed live drive-by shootings, like what people see in the movies. I witnessed that. I also witnessed at the time we had what they call Rolling 60 Crips and Hoover Crips. So on our campus, coach, and I know you know because we have both of those rivalry games on our campus, we would have school lockdowns. We would have school lockdowns because the Hoovers in the 60s wanted to fight on campus, right? So it was bad, right? It's bad. Gang affiliation was bad. But at the heart of those children at the time, they was just children trying to find a place to fit in. They was trying to find family in a unit. So they gravitated to where they felt they belonged and where they feel as if they fit in really well, which led to the gang activity. However, and I know this is going to sound funny to some of your viewers, but some of our smartest children were gang members. They was just making poor choices. So we grew up
Yes.
in, yeah, they just making bad choices. And unfortunately, being in that environment at a very young age, a lot of my classmates died. A lot of my classmates was in jail, and some of them just now getting out of jail. They went in at the age of 17. They served 20 plus years in jail. So they went in as children and come out as adults. So it was a very valid neighborhood to grow up in if you went from there. So so I could walk the street of the Cooper Road and feel very safe. My father grew up on the Cooper Road. My mother grew up on the Cooper Road. And we have a lot of love for one another that's there. We're very loyal to the neighborhood. We're very loyal to one another. But to grow up in that environment, still, you had people that had a desire to move beyond the immediate environment. So just because you're in that environment doesn't mean that has to be your end. You still can move beyond that. So we were able, so back to your question, how was I able to move beyond my immediate environment? I had a genuine desire to do something more than what my immediate environment offered me. And we had such great educators like yourself, Coach Loris, many other teachers that poured into us to let us know, hey, there is more to life than within these four walls. You can do anything that you put your mind to. And to have so many African American male and female educators on our campus, it's like, okay, we see it live because everybody there went to school, got a degree, and was teaching. So we knew that it was possible. So being around just other individuals that are already professional pouring into us, it gave me the desire to go out and do something beyond my immediate environment.
And you have been, and you continue to be phenomenal. And you and I both could name individuals that are progressing and moving forward also. But this is your show tonight. They have to tell their own. They have to tell their own stories. So listen, as we move this program along, and I'm sitting here and I'm listening to Trina, because Trina, I keep laughing because I remember you as a young student at Green Oaks, and you always appeared to be very quiet to me. I was never in a situation where I saw you, say a lot or talk a lot or anything like that. And it's just so refreshing to see and to hear as you share tonight. And that's why I warned you earlier. When you see me looking this way, it's not because you're talking too long. It's because I'm looking at the monitor. And I'm looking at the thumbs and the hearts, even some tears going up, etc. So some of the people are identifying. And I just want to tell you guys again, feel free, you have questions, please put them in the chat box. So, Ms. Trina, now I observed just a short time ago, you were speaking to a group of individuals, I think, in Dallas, Texas. Can you share with us a little bit what that presentation was? Not the presentation itself, but how you actually got involved and things of that nature as you were sharing and educating others.
It may have been in Houston. I'm currently residing in Houston.
It may have been Houston.
Yeah. So it may have been in Houston. Well, my last speaking engagement was for celebration of Women's Month. And so I got invited out to a corporation called Westlake. They employ over 60,000 employees. And I was asked to come and speak to their organization along with the CEO of United Way. And the topic was give to gain. How do we actually give to gain? And because it was centered around Women's Month, I basically was telling women, like, it's okay to give another woman a compliment. It's okay to help another woman shine. Just because you help another woman shine, it doesn't dim your light. Like the moon and the sun, they both could shine at the exact same time. That everybody is capable to actually walk in their own lane and own it. And you gain more when you make an introduction, when you make a phone call, when you give an encouraging word. It's like you point it to somebody else. And for me, I'm all about leaving a legacy. Now, whether I know you a lifetime or if I know you for 5 minutes, I'm wondering, what am I going to impact on this person? What kind word, what encouraging word, what empowering word? How can I inspire that person to level up? So I'm all about leaving a legacy. So when I do give a speech, I'm giving a speech as if it's my last one. I don't care if it's a 5-minute speech or an hour speech. I'm going to give you all that I have, because we live in a time where we don't know our tomorrow end, when it's going to be our last breath that we're going to take. So we can't take for granted the days, the moments, the minutes that we have. Like we really have to embrace it and give it all that we have. As I'm thinking about that, I have a best friend that passed many years ago. He passed on my 30th birthday, my 31st birthday. He passed on my 31st birthday. And I was actually thinking about that this morning. And, sometimes a person's name may just come in your mind over and over again, right? So I never forget his name just kept popping up in my mind, popping up in my mind. So finally I stopped what I was doing and I called him. And when I called him, he said, you always seem to know when something's going on with me. And I didn't know anything was going on with him, but I know that his name just kept coming up in my spirit so hard. So I made the phone call. When I made the phone call, he said, well, I went to the doctor last week and they told me that I have a tumor that's going to be the size of a basketball in my stomach and I have to have surgery. So I said, okay, we talked about it. And then he told me when his surgery was going to be. And then a couple of days later, he's going to have his surgery. So I called him and, I prayed for him and wished him well. And I remember then he was trying to tell me goodbye. He knew he wasn't going to make out the surgery, but I couldn't receive it. I was like, no, I'm going to call you after the surgery. I got your mom number, I have your brother number. I'm going to call you. And I was living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and he was living in Shreveport. And 3 days after his surgery, I get a phone call from his brother. And I just thought it was so strange because brother generally don't call me, but I was like, okay, what's going on? He's like, did you hear what happened to Eric? His name is Eric Lynn. He graduated from C.E. Bird High School. And I was like, no, what happened? At that time, all these things going through my head. I'm like, did his leg get amputated? I don't know why I thought that because he was having surgery on his stomach. He said, no, Eric didn't make it. And Eric was 30 years old. And I just remember for the next like 48 hours in my head, I kept playing over and over again. What did I say to him? What was our last conversation? How did I leave him the last time that we talked? And I finally made peace with, we said everything we needed to say. The only thing I did not say to him, I didn't tell him that I love him. And I remember thinking I need to either tell him I love him or I need to text him that I love him, but I did not. And so that's the one thing that I have to live with, that I had that opportunity to tell him that, and that I did not. So we have to take every moment that we have and value it and leave a legacy. So I just want to leave a legacy with everybody that I come in contact with, even if it's just, oh, I felt really good, or she had a positive attitude. So that's going to be my legacy.
Wow, that's very powerful. Which brings us now to that wonderful book. And listen, I want you to talk about all of the books that you've written, or any papers that you've written, etc. And I know that we definitely are going to talk about the last book that you've written, but I wanted my audience to get to know you,
sure,
so that they really could grasp what you were going to be sharing about your book. They know the title, and about surviving domestic violence, that type thing as a child, etc. But I wanted them to get to know you. So let's get to know and talk a little bit about your books.
Sure. So the first book I wrote was a book of poems. I love poetry. I still love poetry to this day. And as a matter of fact, when I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, I was on the poetry scene and my stage name was Poetic. So I would get up on stage and I would do my little poems. My next book, it was actually birthed out of my struggle. So when I was in Atlanta, I worked for 3 companies, and all 3 companies consecutively went out of business. I worked for company 1, it went out of business. I worked for company 2, it went out of business. And then I worked for company 3, and it too went out of business. And I struggled like many Americans, living paycheck to paycheck. And I literally was in my apartment in Atlanta, Georgia, and like on my knees, facing the wall, really having a pity party for myself because I had to ask for help, and I'm not used to having to ask for help. And I didn't have a lot, but I was very independent. So I found myself having to go to different food pantries and say, hey, I don't know how to eat. I need help eating. Or I had to go to church and say, I don't have enough money to cover my rent. Because the companies went out of business, I automatically qualified for unemployment compensation, but it was just only a fraction of what I was making. And I remember just sitting, just two epiphanies I had while I was sitting on the floor in the corner, like literally my face was turned to the corner. And my first epiphany was I was like, oh my God, I am nothing, because I began to lose all of my material possessions. The little that I had, I was losing it. And I was like, I'm just nothing. And God was like, how dare you, Latrina Johnson, define your self-worth based on material things that you own? How dare you? You are my daughter. That in itself makes you valuable. You are the prize. You are priceless. So I'm like, okay, I got it. I got it. You're right, Father. Thank you, Jesus. And then the second was I literally was on the floor and I was like, woe is me. I was having a really good pity party for myself. It was a great pity party too, right? And then in that same moment, I said to myself, Latrina, either you can sit here and you can have a pity party for yourself, or you can get up and begin to change your life. And so my second book was entitled Change Your Life by Changing Your Mind. So I understood that I had to shift my mindset in order to get myself out of the hole that I was in. Now, granted, I didn't do anything wrong. These companies went out of business. So, bad things do happen to good people. But sometimes when God allowed these things to happen, it's either allowable or necessary. So it's either allowable because God knows that you can handle it. He know that you will stay the course. He know that you still will continue to praise and worship him. It won't break you. Because I know a lot of things that I went through, it would have broken a lot of people, but God knows that it would not break me. So it's either allowable or necessary. And sometimes God allow, calamities come into your life because it's necessary to propel you to the level in where he's taking you. So there's people that God has assigned to me to speak into. And if I had not had those valley moments, I could come from a place of empathy. But because I could say, hey, I was down and God got me up, or I could say, hey, there was a time where I didn't have health insurance for 3 years when those companies went out of business, God kept me healthy. I can speak to them where they are. So it was necessary to where God was taking me in my life. So I wrote the book. It was a great book. It was a great experience. I'm not going to say it was a great book, but it was a great testament of what God can do when you actually trust and lean in on him. And just really put your faith in. And then I had to work. Okay. I had to sit down and I had to write. So that's how my second book came about. One of the words in the book that I coined was mind, mental images, navigating dreams. Mind is the acronym. I'm going to say it again. Mental images, navigating dreams. So God would give you a vision, right? And that vision is for you to begin to break it down as a big puzzle, break it down into pieces so that you can actually see your dream come to pass. But you have to be able to see the big picture. You'll see the ending before the beginning. And sometimes when you see the ending, what it's going to end up like, you get a little bit anxious because now you have to break it down. And God may show you a complete vision in 2026, and it may not come to pass to 2029. You have to be able to stay the course, and going back to look at how can you break this down in smaller pieces to be able to achieve your dream and goal. And sometimes that may be networking. Sometimes they may be doing additional research. Sometimes they may be going back to school. It can require a lot of different things. But just because God gives you a vision and it doesn't happen right away, it doesn't mean it's not supposed to happen.
Surviving childhood domestic violence. Allow me to share with you, as you get ready to share that with us, I too happen to be a survivor of that. I was to the point that I almost took a life, and I'm not proud of that. So when I saw that, I'm like, wow, Trina needs to come and talk about this, because I was just admonishing. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, and I'm not. But I was talking to a women's group a while back, and they were dealing with domestic violence, which I'm a part of the domestic violence task force here in Shreveport, Bossier. And I kept asking, when are we going to do a seminar about children that
Oh,
survive domestic violence?
oh,
And I was really disappointed, to be honest with you, as to how cavalier they were about addressing that. Now, I know that the ladies were and remain under a lot of pain. So I was not, wanting to keep pushing and be male chauvinistic about it. So I just kind of backed off. But I did find it strange that
sure.
as nurturing as moms are, I thought that they would jump at the idea, of us doing a workshop on that. So when I saw your book, I'm like, wow, man, this needs to be talked about across the nation. So as we segue into your book, I really want our audience to hone in and understand that this is a very serious topic, and it's nothing to be shrugged at. It's nothing to be poo-pooed at. And allow me to say, Trina, as a man, is one of my biggest disappointments when I talk to young men and men as to how cowardly they are when it comes to putting their hands on women. And I say
Yeah.
that to you, and I have to just say this to you, Trina. Allow me, having always been a big, powerful man, having always been around men, playing football and boxing and things like that. But some of these same men who women thought were so tough were the same men that would not dare fight another man that they thought were going to kick their butts. Now they'd run and get weapons and bats and tell about getting equalizers and all of that. But you thought it's okay to beat up a woman, but you didn't think it was okay because you knew you was going to get your butt kicked when you're dealing with other men. So
Yeah.
what you're going to talk, and I want my audience to know, is that what you're going to talk about tonight is very serious, and it's a very touchy subject. And so we don't want anybody to get their feelings hurt. That's why I wanted to put that out there. I call them cowards because anytime, and I tell people, Trina, that
Yeah.
people do not want to accept a simple fact. You can talk to 99.9% of people, whether it's work or whatever they're doing, they're going to say, man, I'm tired, I'm ready to go home. Well, what the heck? If home is your refuge and that's the only place you can go to feel safe, but you can't even go there to feel safe, that's horrific. So I want our audience tonight to understand where you're coming from.
The title of the book is The Legacy of Domestic Violence Seen Through the Eyes of a Child Survivor. The reason I have chosen to write this book is because I am a child survivor of domestic violence. And I realize many people do not understand the impact on children growing up in a home of domestic violence. So it doesn't surprise me, Coach, when you say that you're speaking to the ladies at the domestic violence seminar and you ask them about doing something for children who survived it. A lot of times the women that has been in domestic violent relationships, they don't understand the impact that it does have on the children. So I am going to spend the rest of my life bringing awareness to the impact because I can tell you, growing up in that environment, I'm still working through it. I mean, many years ago, and the violence in my home ended over 20, 30 years ago, many years ago, and I'm still working through it. So, and I know, and I want to say to your viewers, this is a safe space. I'm not here to judge anybody. Whether you're the person who have been a victim, whether you're the person that has been the one who actually was the assailant in the domestic dispute, I'm not judging anyone. So I want to say that. Okay. So now I would like to share with you some of my own personal experience, and I know that each child has their own experiences growing up in a home of domestic violence, and it make it look different. In my home, it was my father physically and verbally abusing my mom. And then a lot of people don't know this aspect of it. Sometimes the victim actually began to victimize. So then my mother began to victimize my brother and I. So it became an environment of perpetual cycle of violence in the home. So I want to say that. And I want to share with you all just what it was like growing up in my home. First of all, people on the outside thought we had the picture perfect family. So we had the picture perfect nuclear family. I remember even hearing friends in high school, man, I would love to have your family. Now, and and that's great. But so the first 10 years, so my parents was married a total of 47 years. Together a total of 50 years. They were married until my father passed in 2019. So I need to give you that little bit of context. It's a very complex situation, right? So the first 10 years of their marriage, it was riddled in violence. And what that looked like from a child's view was I never knew when there was going to be cussing. I never knew when there was going to be my father hitting my mother. I never knew when it was going to be because my mother is angry or she's sad and she's frustrated. That all of her frustration now was going to be dumped onto me as a child. I'm talking about going all the way back. I can remember going all the way back to the ages of 3 and 4 years old. So it was dishes being broken. It was arguing from sun up to sundown. My home was not a place of refuge. It was not a peaceful existence for many years. Even when my father was calm, my mother was enraged. So there was always a lot of arguments in the home. There was always a lot of yelling in the home. There was no such thing as peaceful conflict resolution. So it was always conflict, and then there was fighting. There was no let's sit down and talk it out and talk it through. So how did that impact me? Well, before I get to me, let me just say it impacts children all different, right? Like some girls, they would grow up and they would get in a relationship with men that would continue the cycle of being physically abused. Some boys grow up in the household, they will also grow up and continue that cycle of abuse by abusing their girlfriends and wives because it becomes normal. So a lot of times as children, you imitate the environment which you grew up in, right? So I remember many days I would have a horrible night at home, and then I would wake up and go to school, and no one knew how horrible it was the night before, or even that morning. They would have no idea what I just went through, right? And it wasn't that I wasn't in a situation where my parents would say, "Hey, don't go tell nobody, don't tell nobody," right? It was so horrific, and as a child, I didn't have language to even describe what I seen and what I heard. So whatever you can possibly think about when it comes to violence, I saw it. All of it. I saw hitting, slapping, being pulled by the hair. Rape was in the home. I know some people think, can a husband rape the wife? Absolutely. So I witnessed all of that. I witnessed everything that you possibly can imagine. And the thing that impacted me the most was around the age of 4, my mother started telling me it was my fault that the violence was in the home. So to carry that burden on my shoulders was really, really, really heavy. Um, it was really heavy. So now a little bit more complexity to it. And I know this is gonna sound weird, but I love my daddy. I was a daddy's girl to the heart. So that became very complex because here I am. I love this man that's hurt my mom, the first woman that I ever loved. But and some people will argue. They will argue this. I'm like, my dad was the best dad in the world. I am who I am partially because of my father. He taught me how to be independent. He taught me how to, get knocked down and get back up. Not physically, but yeah. But how to overcome obstacles and challenges. My father was the one who taught me how to tie my shoes, how to write my name. It was my father who taught me how to cook. It was my father who gave me hugs and I love you. Now, my mother growing up in the household, she never once ever in my life told me she loved me up until maybe about 2 years ago. She never once growing up ever hugged me. So I didn't have any nurturing from my mom, but I got all the nurturing from my dad. I remember there were times where I'll be outside playing. My father would call my name, Latrina, and we was raised to say, sir and ma'am. I'll say, sir. He'll say, come here. I'll run to the house. He'll say, I love you. And I'm just standing there. He said, that's it. Now go and play. So a lot of times people think that harm and love cannot coexist in one person. In fact, that it can. Because my father anger, it was very precise. I never saw him anger towards anybody other than my mother. So I'm not sure exactly what the dynamics was for my father to be so angry towards my mother, for him to be violent towards her like that. But my father was always very gentle with me, always very loving and kind with me, always very hands-on with me. Now, the flip side of it was my mother was not. My mother was not, she didn't give me the nice words. My mother, she told me often as a child she didn't like me. When I tell people, oh, my mother didn't like me, it's like, well, no, maybe she did. No, she didn't. She said it verbally. She said, I don't like you, Latrina. I remember going off to college thinking, oh gosh, my mom doesn't like me. I just grew to accept it that, yeah, I knew she loved me because she was around, but she didn't like me. Now, I do have grace for my mother because I understand the environment which she was in, right? She was in a volatile environment. And sometimes hurt people hurt people. So she just unleashed it onto me, right? And again, some things are allowable or necessary, right? So I don't think it was necessary, but maybe necessary for my mom, but she had to find a way to out to, let her frustrations and anger out. And a lot of it came onto me. So how has it impacted me as an adult? Hmm. Well, I had nightmares every single night of my life up until I was 19 years old. So I suffered from PTSD. So that was one. Two, my ability to communicate effectively in relationship was skewed tremendously. Anytime there was a conflict, I would shut down for two reasons. One, if if a man was to yell or argue to me in the back of my head, that's going to lead to violence. And it is not true, right? It's not, that's not always the case. But in my head, if I engage in this argument, there's going to be violence that's going to follow. So I would inadvertently just not argue. I don't care what it's about. We're not going to argue. And that's not healthy, because in a relationship, if you want it to be lasting, you have to be able to engage in those tough conversations with the understanding that it's not going to necessarily end up in violence. So that's one way that it impacted me. So I couldn't, and not even in romantic relationships. I mean, there have been girlfriend friendships that I've had. Maybe I became angry instead of talking about it. I just cut them off because it was just easier, because I did not have the skill set to talk through it. I remember this one particular incident where I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was an educator teaching kindergarten, and I was on the volleyball team. Coach, can you believe that? We said I was quiet in high school, but I also played basketball. I mean, played not basketball. I also played volleyball. And we were in a championship. We was in a championship game, right? And a ball came to, and it was a co-ed, so men and women on the team. It was a volleyball that came to me, and I missed it. I messed the play up. So I know everybody, we sensitive. Everybody, we want to win. And here I'm missing the ball, so it wasn't good. So one of the men on the team, he came and he stood over me, yelling like, "You shouldn't have missed the ball. You shouldn't have missed the ball." Right? I went into my fight, flight, and freeze mode, because of course, when you go to your downstairs brain, you actually go back to that childhood, because now I've been triggered. So I went back to my childhood, thinking about the last time I seen a man yell and scream at, it was my father screaming and yelling at my mother. And literally on the volleyball court, I froze. I did not move. They volleyed, the game was going on, and I did not move. And he came to me, he's like, if you're not gonna play, get off the court. I literally did not move. And I remember we had a timeout. And then the next day, I remember thinking, what happened to me? because at that time I didn't understand fight, flight, and freeze. I didn't understand being triggered, and I didn't even understand my own behavior. I didn't understand why did I behave in that manner where I just did not move at all. When I became a trauma-informed practitioner, I began to understand how the brain works and the wiring of the brains, and how in that moment I actually was triggered and I froze. I froze. So a lot of times, again, adults, they don't understand the impact that it has on their children. And I'm so intentional in creating a safe environment and refuge for my daughter. I have a 9-year-old little girl. My home has to be peaceful. It has to be our sanctuary. I'm intentional in interrupting that cycle of generational domestic violence. Like, it would not come to my home. And because, and sometimes even now I lay up in my bed and it's so quiet and peaceful because I didn't have peace growing up. And the fact that my daughter, she has peace. She says stuff like, I can't wait to go home. Or sometimes I'm like, you want to go to the movies? No, I just want to go home. I'm like, Christina, why you want to go home? I love being at home. When I remember growing up in my home, like, man, I don't want to go home. Because a lot of times when my parents had their bouts of fighting, they would close the door to their bedroom as if them closing the bedroom door, it gave an illusion that it wasn't happening. But yes, indeed, it was happening. So we knew when that bedroom door closed, we knew that there was a lot going on behind the door. But also, what's a little bit interesting is that after many times after my mother and father would fight, my father would go into the living room. And I don't know, coach, back in the days, the living room was sacred. You can go into the living room, right? So he went into the living room and he would sit in the dark with his head in his hand. He would just sit there. And I would hear my mother in her bedroom, she's sobbing. But I would go and I would sit right next to my father. Instead of my mother, I was my father's. I would go and comfort my father. Now, he's the one who would beat up on my mom, but I would go and comfort my father. And I asked myself many times, why did I do that? Because my father was the one who showed me closeness and showed me love, and my mother did not. But here's the thing, the legacy of domestic violence, right? So that's the legacy, because I would never know who my mother may have been if she had not been in that environment. My mother's natural makeup may have been one that's loving and kind and nurturing, and because I'm very feeling emotion. My daughter and I, we hug 3, 4, 5 times a day. We tell each other we love each other 3, 4, 5 times a day. That's my natural makeup. That's who I am to my core. So sometimes I wonder who my mother was before she got into this type of environment, because I'm sure it changed her, right? But I would never know who that woman was. I just know the woman that I experienced because of the abuse. So, anybody have any questions or comments? I know that was a lot.
No, 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 no. That's why I warned you earlier. The reason I'm looking is I want to see the effect on the screen, and I don't want you to start. I don't want you to start crying. But I mean, the tears, man, they are wow. The tears are going, and the smiles are going. But Angelina Dorchette, looks like D-O-U-C, looks like Angelina Dorchette. And Angelina, if I'm mispronouncing your name incorrectly, then send me another message. But Angelina Dorchette from San Antonio, Texas, is asking. She's saying, "You've done." She said, "You've done a great job explaining," but she said, "Please tell me, where did you get the strength from as a young person to endure that?"
I grew up in the church. A lot of my strength came from God, my relationship with Him. I love Jesus. I love God. But I can tell Angelina, like my early days, like this is what I can recall. My first time really praying fervently to God was that the violence in my home would stop. I remember sitting at the edge of my bed. There was a moment in which my parents was fighting. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed praying and asking God, please, God, let this stop. Let them stop fighting. So I have had a relationship with God all my life. And so I know that He gives me the strength, or He gave me the strength to go through that. And that's really, really, really it. That's the only thing I can hold on to. So that's a great question, because it makes me think about, because I've wondered throughout the years, you know, why no one helped my mom. Like my father is one of 5 brothers, and my mom
Mhm.
has a brother, and my mom has 2 sisters that's married. So there were a lot, and I know that they knew. Like, why didn't anybody step in? And even if they
Yeah,
weren't concerned about my mother, why were they not concerned about their nieces and nephews in the house going up and about the home like that?
yeah.
They help. They don't know. They help perpetuate the cycle.
And might I say to you, uh, okay, David Sanchez, but listen, might I say to you, David, I'll get to your question in a minute, is that all of those questions you're posing are very, very solid questions. And that's why again, I won't throw anybody under the bus, but see, that's why we need you to do some seminars and workshops across the country about that. But now David is asking, okay, David, you sound like me now. David is saying that he'd be so angry at his father that he really want to hurt his father. He said he's trying to understand why you felt it necessary. Now, I understand as an adult because you've explained the closeness with you. And David, I'm answering the question. She's our condolences when he was the one causing your mother pain.
That's a great question. And the only way I can answer it is full transparency. I did not like my father hurting my mother. And to see my mother hurt was very painful. But it's like 2 separate relationships.
Mm-hmm.
My father, he inadvertently hurt me by hurting my mother, but my father did not hurt me.
Yeah.
And
And
I
that's
know that
tough.
may not, and that's very tough because it's like, how do you love a person that you know is hurting the only? I mean, my mother was my first love, the first woman I ever loved. And she's my mom, right?
Yeah.
But it was 2 totally separate relationships. My father did not hurt me. My father was always there for me. My father, he did everything for me. So what have I had moments of being disappointed in my father? Absolutely. But
Okay.
but let me say this
Okay.
too. My father, now again, the first 10 years of their marriage, you have to keep in mind, they were married 47 years.
Mm-hmm.
The first 10 was horrible. I was a child in those first 10. So that shaped who I became in a lot of aspects. But my father apologized to my mother many, many times. He apologized to the family many, many times. I heard my father take accountability for, the things that he had done towards my mother. So,
Mm-hmm.
and he did that like many years ago. Like, so, but yeah, I understand
Yeah.
now. To David, it's different for a boy growing up in a home as
Yes.
opposed to a female. It's totally different. So I do have an older brother, and I don't try to tell his story. His story and his truth and his experience is his. But of course, it impacted him differently because I do understand that men by nature, they're protectors,
Yes.
right? And so how
Yes.
now, so I can't speak on the behalf of a man, but I can only imagine, how does a boy feel being helpless and to be able to protect his mom from his dad? So, that's a question I can't answer. I don't.
As you said, boys feel as though we are protectors. And I can't speak for every boy, but most that I've known, including my baby brother, we want to exact violence on anybody that's hurting our mother. We had as you've shared, the relationship with your dad. Our mom was very sweet, very kind, very easygoing, and you know, when we experienced, hearing her screaming or seeing her with a busted lip and things like
Mhm.
that, it would enrage you. And I
Yeah.
know it did me and my baby brother too. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to end the suffering.
Yeah.
That was locked in my head, was to end the suffering. Then I would get angry with her sometimes and wonder, why would you stay with
Mm.
somebody that was abusing you in at
Mhm.
all, let alone in this manner? So as a boy, it was very difficult for me, and that's why I say for my little brother as well, because one time I've told this story before. They used to have these bats called a fungo bat. And this fungo was an extra hard bat that they'd use for batting practice and stuff like that. And my little brother, he couldn't have been any more than, heck, I'll say he's 4 years younger than me. So I think I was around 14. He could have been any more than like 10. And here he comes down the hall with this fungo bat and then smash his dad in the head with the bat. And I don't know to this day, as you say, Trina, you still live through stuff. I don't know to this day why I stopped him. I'm glad I stopped him. And maybe it was God the reason I stopped him.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he probably would have killed him if he had hit him in the head with that bat, because he was that angry, just as I was. And I was physically threatening to put hands on him at that time. And here come my little brother with the bat. So with boys, it is different because you want to protect your mom, but at the same time, as children, he never did. I've heard all kinds of stories about how dads or stepdads or whatever treat the boys and how mean and nasty they are, but he was never like that to us. So that's why I said I can identify with you, and when you're saying is that sometimes you get caught in a dilemma because they're not doing anything to you physically, but mentally they are, because they're hurting your mom.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So the thumbs and the hearts and the tears have been going up exponentially, and they have really been tuned in. And anytime they don't ask at least more than 5 questions, that means they were really tuned in. Okay. So I'd like to thank you for being here. Are there any parting words or anything you'd like to leave with them at this time?
If you are in a domestic violence situation right now, I would encourage you to get out, find resources and support to help you to get out. If not for yourself, for the children that's involved. I asked my mother recently, like within the last 5 years, why did you stay? And her response was she was afraid of what other people would say about a failed marriage. And that's really sad, because to stay and get beat up because you're afraid of what other people can say, that's a little bit ludicrous, So you can't be afraid of what other people are going to say. You have to think about yourself and think about the well-being of your children, because it makes the world a difference. If I are in there has been times when she said to me, I stayed for y'all, meaning her children. And I was like, no, you couldn't have stayed for us, because you did way more damage by staying. I wish they would have gotten that worse. Although that's not my call to make. But if you're in that situation, please feel free to reach out to me. I have some resources. I got all the hotlines that you need, or get out of the situation. And love yourself enough to be okay. And don't be afraid of what other people are going to say. But I don't have anything else to say. But thank you so much, Coach Lawrence, for inviting me to your show. The book will be out either the spring or the summer. I'm doing my final edits. I want to make sure I get the book, because I asked some tough questions in there. I asked some questions like, if parents stay in domestic violence, is it child abuse? Who's to blame? Is it the mother or the father? I ask, and I answer. So you want to know the question, how I responded? You may be surprised at what I said. So make sure you stay tuned to the book.
Looking forward to it. So guys, we appreciate you being here. Miss Trina, again, it's been a phenomenal night. We're so happy that you're here, and I'm happy that you came on. And when the book comes out, you have to come back, or even before that. But I do want to share with the audience, normally, we don't do them back to back, but tomorrow night, because we have a special presentation with Olympic gold medalist Mel Pender. Now, Mr. Pender was around winning gold medals before most of you were born. So you may have to go and research who Mr. Mel Pender is, but he'll be with us tomorrow night. But he's a little under the weather. And I'm sharing with you also, Ms. Trina, he's a little bit under the weather, so we may have to cancel. But anyway, guys, we'd like to have you back. So guys, this has been the Nobody Asked Me Guy Show. I'm your host, Melvin Casey Lars. And as you see, we have phenomenal guests. So we'd like you to find us on YouTube, go to the Nobody Asked Me Guy show, like and subscribe. And we do not charge a subscription fee.